Hi guys, this is Nick for Creation Army TV once again, and this series of videos we'll be talking about brushes. Specifically in this one we'll be talking about scatter brushes. If you haven't seen my videos already about art brushes, I encourage you to watch those. I go into a lot of detail about how to make, create, replace, recolor, resize art brushes. You can even nest them together. So today we'll be talking about scatter brushes. Scatter brushes are different from art brushes. They let you sort of randomly, they let you draw a line which instead of like an art brush where the artwork conforms perfectly to the line as one piece, scatter brushes let you create sort of particle effects, or they let you randomly distribute artwork along a line that you draw. So what's going on here? We've got this star which has turned into this field of stars. So you can do that with a scatter brush, and this serves all kinds of purposes. You might have to do a star field. You might be doing a nighttime illustration where you have to just have some white dots in the sky that sort of fade off to nothing, and that's your night sky stars. You might be doing an illustration where you're showing grass, and you don't want to sit there and draw every strand of or every blade of grass. You can't. So you can use scatter brushes to quickly come up with a field of particles like that. You might be doing an illustration where there's a swarm of bees, and they're tiny and they should all be the same, and so you can just make one bee and turn it into what looks like an angry swarm of bees pretty quickly. Here's how it works. You make your original artwork. I would recommend making it small, and you'll see why in some of my previous videos about art brush. So I'm going to take this star and drag it in. I've already got it in here as a scatter brush, but if you just drag it into your brush palette like I did in my previous videos, I'll come up with this new brush panel, and it'll ask me what type of brush I want to make. I have a few options here, and this time I'll use scatter brush. I'll hit OK, and the secondary panel pops up. This is asking us if we want to if we want to name it, and I will. We'll name it star 2 because I already have another star in there. And then we go down the panel, and we can look at we can change the size, the spacing, the scatter, the rotation, and the colorization method, and then of course relative to page or path. So here's what these all mean. The size deals, of course, with the size of the object, and if I change this to random, then this second slider pops open here. The first one on the left represents the minimum size relative to the original. So here's my original star, and if I dial in, let's say 50 here, then the smallest star I'll get in this random field will be 50% of the original. You can go down as far as you want to. For some reason the slider stops at 10, but you can actually dial in 2 if you want to, or 2.5. I rounded it up, but you can dial in whatever you want here with the keypad. And then as we go to the other slider, I can slide this up so the largest stars or particles in the field will be 371%. So it can go as high as that. And again, it's going to be random. I'll just leave that at 100 for now, but I think you can go as high as 5,000. Something like that. There's an upper limit, and I forget what it even lets me go to 10,000. I think in earlier versions of Illustrator there's an upper limit of maybe 5,000, but I'll leave it at 100. Same thing goes for spacing. What spacing does, if I put this on random, is along the line. I'll just hit OK to get out of this. All right, let's actually see what's happening live. So if I draw a line, and I'm not finished making that scatter brush yet, but I'll come back to it. If I draw a line, and right now it's just a black stroke, but I'll apply that scatter brush that I just made. You can see what's happening here. I've just got some black stars that are sort of just traveling along this line. It almost looks like the blend which I made in a previous tutorial. You can watch that on my channel. So along this line we've got these stars that are sort of scattered, and again some of them are small, some of them are large, and that's all controlled with this panel. So at any time, you don't have to have this selected, but at any time you double click this scatter brush options and this will come right back up. If I had two lines that had this scatter brush applied to it, any changes I make here would apply to both. But you want to click preview, and then I can just go ahead and change any of these. And as I move the sliders, you'll notice that the stars actually change. And it's not terribly random right now, but you can actually randomize it later. Spacing. The spacing right now is very even. You can see there's almost an even amount of space in between each star. But if you randomize these values, again, this slider on the left is your lower limit. You'll see that they start to bunch and get closer together, and this is your upper limit, which you can also bring down to the left, and things will get really close together if you bring these values down. This is how you can nicely achieve tight bunching, like when you're trying to do grass. So I'll leave these sort of spaced out a little bit. There we go. And scatter deals with their distance, the distance of each one of these particle objects to the original spine of the line, which is right where my mouse is. So if you decrease one of these, they'll actually travel sort of downward or away. And if you, I'm sorry, I'll go random. And if you increase this slider, they'll go up as well. So that's how I achieve this sort of random star field. But notice how they're all standing perfectly straight up, and stars don't usually do that. So if you change the rotation value to random, you can randomize their rotation as well. I'll hit OK. It'll ask me if I want to apply. Yes, I do. Once again, if you choose this line, the spine will light up, and now I can move this around. Notice how I'm selecting one of the stars, which in wireframe is not even there. But if you do select one of those, you'll be selecting the object. You don't necessarily have to find the spine, which is right there, and it's invisible. You can actually just click on one of the particles, and the entire line will be selected. Okay, so now I have this nice, random sort of field of stars. Okay, but how can I vary the color? Well, once again, I'll double click this brush and I'll edit it, and you can change the colorization method to tints. I'll hit OK. Notice how nothing happens because these are actually tinted black. But I'll choose the stroke and I'll change it to pink, and it's very hard to look at right now. Maybe orange would be a little bit better. And now you can freely change the color however you want to. Again, if you watch my tutorial on changing or controlling the color of art brushes, you'll know that a solid black value of my parent object will allow me to use spot colors to their fullest tint value. Okay, so what else can we do with this? Let your imagination run wild. You don't just have to draw one object. You could draw, for instance, you could draw a cartoon fish here and use that as a scatter brush, and instead of a field of stars, I would have a school of fish. And again, you just draw one object and you go ahead and let Illustrator sort of randomize or distribute or make a field of objects for you to something that look like a school of fish or a swarm of bees, like I mentioned before. Here's how I like to use. Here's what I like to do to make particle effects, and you might run into this a lot if you're dealing with clients who want a field of stars, but they want the field of stars to be near the horizon, let's say. They want the field of stars to be invisible, and then up as we go higher into the sky, the stars could be like larger and a little bit brighter. So I'll just duplicate this line. Here's another quick tip. If you select a line that you have an art brush applied to, and you just click once on the scatter brush that's applied to it, it will actually re-randomize the particles. So if you just click it again, you'll get a different random seed every time. Helpful tip. All right, but here we go. Your client wants you to make a field of stars, and I'm just extending these lines, that is not visible or tiny down here, but large up here. So you can't exactly control that precisely with the scatterbrush panel alone, but if you combine these two lines that I've drawn with a blend, you can achieve that. Now, if you haven't watched my video about blends, or my several videos about blends, you can click them here and you can learn all about blending. I'll just do it right now, assuming that you have some knowledge of blends. But a blend is going to give me a transition from one value to another. I'm going to take the lower field of stars, which my client wants to be tiny and invisible, and I'll change the stroke weight of this scatter brush to maybe 0.1, so it's now like 1/10 the size. You see how small those stars are? They're, they look like crumbs at this point. And I'm actually going to, if you go up to brush options of the selected object, you'll be able to change the scatter on just this specific line of stars, this field of stars. I want to scatter these a huge amount. So you can see that I'm dragging these sliders to -1000 and +1000, and I can even go further than that. If I dial in -3000, you'll see that the stars go down this far, and maybe a +3000 for the upper value. So I'll hit OK, and now that value is dialed in for these stars. And again, they're tiny, but they're there. All right, and also my upper stars are, let's say there's too many of them and they're a little too big. So I'll select this field of stars, I'll hit brush options, and they are too large. I'll hit preview, sorry. They're a little too large and they're a little too close together. So I'll change the spacing to a little bit larger value like this. There we go. And so these will be the stars in the sky that are bigger and farther apart. There we go. I'll hit OK. Now, if I take these two objects, this line, and I combine them with a blend, object, blend, make, you'll see a transition. It's subtle, all right, but what's going on here is I've got a blend, and there's basically one object in between, and it is a split between this value and this value. I'm going to hit blend options, which is right here. Blend options. And please note, if you have a slow computer, this will really slow your computer down, because what Illustrator has to do is not only generate all of these particles and these particles, but it also has to generate those and calculate all the values in between. So please be careful with this. But I'll hit preview on my blend, and I want to do specified steps. Notice that there's only one dialed in. But if I increase his value to maybe 8, we'll have 8 values in between. And so now you have like this field of stars that there's 8 variations in between, and there's a lot more scatter. There's a lot more stars to be seen here, and there's a lot of variation. And I mentioned earlier, your client wants the lowest stars on the horizon to be invisible. So I'm going to direct select with A, the bottom stroke, which made up these tiny, tiny stars. And I will take the transparency of this whole object down to 0. And there we go. And now my field of stars varies in its opacity down until it disappears, basically. My lowest field of stars, which is still here, is invisible. And you can also maybe take the top object and change their tint to a red or a blue or a lighter color, and on the fly you can see the variation that takes place within your field of stars. And this could be anything. Like I said before, it could be blades of grass, it could be field of stars, it could be bees, it could be ants. I've done portraiture in Illustrator before, and I use scatterbrush and randomizing scatterbrushes to achieve freckles on people's faces. So I encourage you to use scatterbrushes to achieve all kinds of effects. There's almost no limitation to what you can do. You can even take, as one final example, I can take this bottom stroke, which is invisible, and I can apply a Gaussian blur to just that bottom stroke. It will severely slow down the redraw, but I will blur the bottom stars to a value of, let's say, 8, and I'll hit OK, and you can see now that some of the stars are blurred and some are not, and as they get down near the bottom they get more and more blurred. Who knows what you can generate with this effect? Maybe you can simulate bokeh from a camera lens, you know, a glamorous look, something where you just draw maybe hexagons or circles, and you vary their opacity, you vary their you know, their blur, things like that, and very quickly you can generate fields of particles. So thank you for watching this video about the basics of Scatterbrush. I encourage you to experiment with it. I'm Nick with Creation Army TV, and thanks again for watching.